Welcome to another video from ExplainingTheFuture.com. This time it's the first of my monthly presentations, and I'm going to be talking about the future of the Metaverse. The meta what, you cry? The Metaverse, which is an increasingly popular term for a future virtual reality incarnation of the internet that will allow us to play and work and purchase in an online 3D world. In October 2021, Facebook devoted the entirety of its Connect 2021 annual keynote to the Metaverse, with Mark Zuckerberg stating that he hoped in the future the company would be known as a Metaverse company and not a social media company. And even more significantly, Mark Zuckerberg announced in that keynote that Facebook had changed its name. No, it has. Facebook, the company, is now known as Meta. So we still have Facebook as a social media application, but the company is now called Meta. And if we turn to the computer, here we are, we go to meta.com, you will see, we go there, it forwards to Facebook as we can see at the top, but it tells us that connection is evolving. We're on the Meta website now, or trying to be. The Metaverse, as it says here, what is the next evolution of social connection? And our company's vision is to help bring the Metaverse to life. So we've changed the name of the company to reflect the commitment to this, which is a pretty big thing, isn't it? And if we go down here, it talks about the Metaverse being social. And if we want, we can watch the entire keynote here on this Facebook website. Or we can go across to YouTube, which is, of course, what I would prefer. And we can go to the Meta page here. Look, that exists as well. And again, you can watch the entire keynote. It's down here somewhere. There we are, 1 hour and 17 minutes. Or you can watch little pieces of it. As you can see, they've taken out all the really exciting bits, so you can see what's going on. There's a virtual office there, all that type of stuff. So what I thought I'd do in this video is to delve a bit more into this. What is Facebook betting the company on? Is it really as significant as Facebook is making out? So let's go across back again and have a couple of slides. Always good to have a couple of slides. And what I'm going to do in this video is as follows. First of all, I want to make sure we've defined the Metaverse properly. Secondly, I want to talk about Facebook's vision, Mark Zuckerberg's vision, and what they're doing in the company so far. I then want to start questioning whether what he's doing is actually really what's going to happen. I want to talk particularly about virtual reality and ubiquitous computing. And then I'm going to turn to what I'm going to call Barnatt's Metaverse Law. I thought I'd introduce something in this video. I thought I'd call it Barnatt's Metaverse Law. Bet you're excited now, aren't you? What's that going to be? And after that, we'll talk about Cyborg Fusion, turning to the deeper futures. And then finally, I'll come back to the idea, is the Metaverse a fantasy being made up by Facebook in terms of promoting the company, or is it something more fundamental? And as you can probably guess, my answer is going to be both yes and no, depending on the frame of time we're looking at. So let's turn to definitions. Always a good idea to know what we're talking about. I've said already that the Metaverse is a virtual reality incarnation of the internet that will allow us to work, play and purchase in an online 3D world. We'll take that as my definition. But there are many others that have been come up with for many years now. This is the one we find on Wikipedia, although it references back to other places. The hypothesized next iteration of the internet, supporting decentralized, persistent, online 3D virtual environments. There we are. And we've also here got the one from Facebook, from Mark Zuckerberg, in his 2021 keynote address. I like this definition, an embodied internet, where you're in the experience, not just looking at it. Mark Zuckerberg is very keen to stress that the Metaverse is all about presence, being able to be present inside a computer world, not just looking at it on a 2D screen. So, what is Facebook doing? What is its vision? Well, I thought we'd bring up a long quote, and I think this one quote really pulls together the essence of how he's presenting this. As you can see, it says the Metaverse will be the successor to the mobile internet. We'll be able to feel present, like we're right there with people, no matter how far apart we actually are. We'll be able to express ourselves in new, joyful, completely immersive ways that's going to unlock a whole lot of amazing new experiences. So this is very exciting, isn't it? This is clearly corporate presentation type of stuff from Mark Zuckerberg in terms of why he's changing the name of the business. But it isn't just talk from Facebook. They're doing a lot of practical stuff. For a start, they are developing actual virtual worlds which we can teleport into, to use the word that Mark Zuckerberg talks about. Horizon is the broad name for all this going on. So, for example, when you first enter the metaverse, you'll arrive in your Horizon home space, like your sort of own home, if you like, in the metaverse, and from there you'll teleport to other places. So you might teleport to a Horizon virtual world, which you might build yourself or other people might build or share things inside them. You might go to a work room, obviously where you'd work in the metaverse, or you might go to a marketplace where you'd trade digital things in the metaverse. And Mark Zuckerberg anticipates a whole metaverse online economy. Let's just look at a few of those. I've got the browser still activated here, so we can go to Horizon Worlds, create, explore together. Lots and lots of stuff here. We can try it out these days if we wish. Massive focus from Facebook on getting creators involved. I think it was $150 million of funding being allocated to help people create content for the metaverse. So it's a really big opportunity if you're into things like 3D modeling and content creation, all that type of stuff. And here's the announcement for Horizon Workrooms, remote collaboration reimagined. Obviously, in and post the pandemic, more and more people will work remotely, and maybe they'll do some of that in Horizon Workrooms, looking a bit like this, as we can see here. What else is Facebook doing, I hear you cry? Well, they're creating 10,000 jobs in Europe, across the EU, in the next 5 years to help build the metaverse. I'm sure they're creating jobs elsewhere, but they had a particular announcement of this. That's a lot of jobs. That's a lot of investment. They are selling and developing virtual reality headsets that allow people to access the metaverse. They have got the Oculus Quest 2 on the market at the moment for, I think, $299 or pound, which is not bad for what the thing does. You can use it standalone. You can use it with a computer. And they've got Project Cambria, which Mark Zuckerberg talked about in his keynote, which is about the next generation headset. And some of these headsets are very impressive because they not just track space with cameras so you can tell where you are and it can orientate the world around you in 3D. They also can track the muscles, the expression on your face to put that onto a virtual avatar. So you can have really good communication in the virtual world, not just relying on seeing you, but actually you can see your expressions, which is really clever. They're also developing stuff for augmented reality, AR, so we can actually have the metaverse overlaid on the real world, smart glasses, things like that. And for me, the most fascinating thing he talks about in the keynote is developing neural interfaces. So, for example, to control your hands in the virtual world, rather than wearing some sort of glove that tracks positions of fingers with force gauges and strain gauges, things like that, you might actually have something on your wrist, and that will read signals from the nerves in your wrist to position your fingers in the virtual world. Very interesting technology. That was something I was not as aware of as I thought I was until I saw that video. So it's worth checking that out, what Facebook is doing with neural interfaces. So that's the Facebook vision, if you like. Are they right? Is this the future of the internet and our use of it? Well, the first thing I'd say is that there's almost nothing conceptually new in what Mark Zuckerberg talks about in his address. It's a good address, lots of exciting technology mentioned, but all the ideas about visiting virtual worlds and working in them and trading in them and all that stuff is decades old. Particularly back in 1984, a science fiction author called William Gibson wrote a book called Neuromancer. I've got it down here. Here we are. This is one of the early editions of Neuromancer. Very exciting. And this is about a guy called Case, he's pictured, I think, on the front there, going into cyberspace by jacking in with a jack in the back of his neck, I think it was, to work online in cyberspace. And all the ideas out of that really inform people thinking about the next interface in computing. And by the middle of the next decade, we had a lot of people making predictions about virtual reality being the next big thing, about being how we would use the internet. And I was one of those people. I wrote the book you can see on the screen here, Cyber Business. I think it was written 93, 94, came out 95. But lots of people were doing that at the time. This is a book I got in 1991, I think, Cyberspace First Steps, edited by Michael Benedict out of MIT in the States. Loads of people were thinking about how do we work online, what will implications be for the economy, for safety, for society. All these things were talked about in a big way many, many years ago. And it's a bit of a shame that Mark Zuckerberg showed apparently no appreciation for that at all in the keynote that he made. And this is very relevant because in the end, all the talk in the 1990s about people going online and working and socializing in online 3D worlds on the internet didn't happen, as you know. We had things like Second Life, some things did happen, and we had a little bit of that, but basically we ended up visiting a 2D World Wide Web. And even that's conceptually quite interesting to me, that we visit a web page. We don't visit a newspaper, we don't visit a book or a magazine, but we do visit the web. So conceptually at least, we give ourselves presence on the internet when we go there, and that's what's built up. So this idea of presence online is there a little bit conceptually already. Now, this leads us to think about to what extent is what Mark Zuckerberg is talking about with Facebook and the metaverse going to happen. And his idea is based basically on a progression. And this is the progression. He suggests that we've gone from having a text-based internet to having a picture-based internet when we could start taking photographs and sharing them online as bandwidth improved, to having a video-based internet today. That obviously is the case. That is what has happened. I'm talking to you using online video right now. It must be true. And he deduces from this that the next progression of the internet has to be an even more immersive media. We've gone text, photo, video, now virtual reality as what he calls the next platform. That is, on the face of it, a very good argument, except that it didn't work back in the 1990s and it hasn't worked since. And I think the way we need to look at this is to recognize there is a spectrum of ways that we can use technology to a large extent in our lives, computer technology. And one of these is virtual reality. And the other is what we can call ubiquitous computing. So virtual reality is about building a 3D world in a computer and visiting it using normally a head-mounted display. Ubiquitous computing is about saying, no, we won't disappear off somewhere else. We will stay in physical reality and we will have lots of computing devices all around us. The idea of ubiquitous computing was first talked about at Xerox PARC in, I think, about 1984, 86, something like that, middle of the 1980s anyway. And they talked about having computing environments where you had 4 types of computers. You had tabs, which were tiny little devices, what we call Internet of Things devices today. We'd have what they call pads, things about the size of a tablet or a smartphone. Obviously, they now exist. We'd have workstations, desktop computers, laptops, things like that. And we'd have what they called boards, big things that we could use to access online content, like today's smart TVs. So all of the things they talked about in these computing environments do exist. And back in the 1990s, myself and many other people were going, which is more likely? Are we going to use the internet by creating 3D worlds, putting on a head-mounted display, going in that way? Or are we likely to have around us in the world masses of different computing devices? And this was a time when we were still reliant largely on cathode ray tubes as our computer displays. And so the idea we would create lots of very high quality small screens, large screens, and very good battery technologies and wireless technologies to link it all together, that seemed a lot less likely than developing head-mounted displays and going into virtual reality. And of course, we were wrong. What we've done in the past 10, 20 years plus has been to develop amazing miniaturized, low-cost screens, processing systems, battery technologies, wireless networking, etc. So ubiquitous computing has fundamentally been the big development of the last couple of decades. And as it says here, look, I should read my own slides first. Yes, so far ubiquitous computing, building computers into the world rather than building new worlds in computing, has been more successful. And I would suggest to you that will continue. Ubiquitous computing will continue to win. Now, thinking about that, what does that mean in terms of the future and the metaverse? Well, I would suggest that for at least a decade, we will continue to build computers into the world far more often than we build new worlds in computers. In turn, I think if we think about the technologies which are going to really matter in the computing industry, I think embodied AI is the really big thing, which in practical words, in more normal words, means Robots and autonomous vehicles would be the big technology developments of the 2020s. I'm sure that is the case. When you talk to companies about what they call digital transformation, using more digital technology in their business in the world, all the focus now is on using technology to change what we do in the physical world. Something like about 7% of the economy, something like that, is purely online. The rest is offline, because human beings need food and shelter and clothing and energy and all these things. They're in the physical world. So the focus has been on doing things in the online world for a long while now, but the focus has shifted to saying, can we make the offline world better, more efficient, more climate friendly, all that sort of stuff using technology? That's where the focus is for digital transformation. And that's why I think we'll see the big development of computing in the next 10 years and beyond that. It won't be metaverse avatars. Now, when we do start venturing more and more into the metaverse, I don't think that'll really happen until we have got very good interfaces for allowing that form of teleportation, to use Mark Zuckerberg's word. And this is where I come to Barnatt's metaverse law, my contribution to this debate, hopefully. What is it, you cry? Well, here is what I think is the case. I think that metaverse access will remain a niche activity until we have ubiquitous, multi-sensory virtual reality interfaces that most people can comfortably use for short and long periods and which are easy to integrate into our lives. Let's pick this apart. We've got to have ubiquitous interfaces. We've got to have metaverse access all over the place. It's got to be multi-sensory. At the moment, there's a lot of focus on the visual senses, on seeing things in virtual reality. That's cool. But if you look at all the examples that people like Mark Zuckerberg give us, they show people doing all kinds of things in the metaverse, which would require us to have very good force feedback, haptic feedback, so that I could touch something and feel it. And if I thump something like that, you can feel the thump. And that's very difficult to do. And no one's really got that working yet. And I've seen people at trade shows strapped into all sorts of machinery so they can get physical sensation linked to immersion. And I've seen people wearing sort of bodysuit things that thump them when something thumps them in virtual reality. There are experiments in this, but they are by no means fully developed yet. So I think you have to be a little bit skeptical when you see all the demos of the metaverse. And you go, hang on, that's not really like being there. You might be able to see it, but you won't be able to feel it and experience it. The body you have, the avatar you have, wouldn't move entirely based on your body. It would move based on the controller, which is not quite the same thing as walking around with legs. I also talk in this definition about comfortable use. We know a lot of people, when they put on a virtual reality headset, feel rather unwell. I'm one of them. Because when you look around, it's fine if the tracking's good and the latency is controlled, and it's much better than it was 20 or 30 years ago. But when you move in virtual reality, if you aren't doing the same movement in the physical world, your brain gets very confused and you can feel very unwell. And that's a problem for virtual reality headsets. And no one has solved it yet. No one solved it in the 1990s. No one solved it today. And it's also rather unpleasant wearing a virtual reality headset for any period of time. The idea will have whole day metaverse experiences. I think Mark Zuckerberg does talk about that somewhere in his keynote. I'm pretty certain he does. That would be rather unpleasant, even with the best of technology we've got today. The Oculus, his latest VR headset that they sell, had a recall a few months ago because the plastic on it caused people to have rashes on their face for some people. So, we've got big issues about how do we make comfortable, fully immersive and multi-sensory virtual reality interfaces. And also here, we've got to be able to integrate this stuff into our lives. And if we can't do that, it ain't going to work. And we've had a lot of evidence in recent years that technologies that don't integrate well into our lives don't get used. Classic example is 3D television. And I must admit, I'm one of these people who always said 3D television is a complete farce. It is never, ever going to work. Why? Because people don't tend to sit down and go, I'm going to watch a television. I can put on my headset to watch the 3D screen, or I can sit in just the right place. Because when we watch television, we also do other things. We talk to other people, at least we used to. We use our smartphones and tablets and things like that. We eat. We look at other people in the room and see what's going on and wander out and go to the toilet and come back again, all sorts of things. We do lots of things together when we use most forms of media, and we've got used to being able to nip between forms of media more and more in the last 20 years, not less and less. And so 3D TV didn't work because it was a once in a time experience. You had to get the headset in the right place. It wasn't going to work. And I think we've got exactly the same problem with the metaverse. Yes, you can stick on your headset and go, isn't that amazing? For 5 minutes, providing you're someone who doesn't feel ill. Will you do it all day? It's an entirely different matter. Now, of course, we will eventually go beyond the virtual reality headset. And as we look longer term, I think the metaverse vision that Facebook's put forward, Meta's put forward, looks a lot more realistic. Back in a few years ago, whenever it was, 2017, 16, I can't remember. Anyway, a few years ago, I wrote, if I can find it, this book here, Digital Genesis, the future of computing, robots and AI. And in that book, I put forward the model you can see on the screen here, the 5 ages of computing, to help us think about how computing has progressed so far and where it will go. And the basic proposition here, I'll just go through very quickly, is that we had early computing, which was complex, expensive and rare. And then we had personal computing for a couple of decades. We use our computers by ourselves. Then we moved to what we could call, in some respects, interpersonal computing. We started to interface with each other using computers. And that's still where we are just about today. I think we're now, though, entering a phase of cognitive computing, where most computing devices can access, either internally or more likely online, some form of machine learning, some form of artificial intelligence. That's going to become more and more and more important. That takes us back to embodied AI, robots, autonomous vehicles, digital assistants, all that type of stuff. And then finally, we will get to cyborg fusion. The point in history, I guess 2040-ish plus, where we will start to augment ourselves directly with computing peripherals. In terms of how that'll work, in terms of how we'll actually achieve cyborg fusion, and there are big debates about do we want to, of course, but let's assume we will for a second. I think to really make it work, we will have to have direct brain-computer interfaces, neural interfaces, linking computers directly into our heads. And when we can do that, we can have true metaverse access, full multi-sensory access, and we can really teleport to a virtual world which will either look and feel just like the real world or like a totally different thing. That'll be an extraordinary experience or a nightmare, depending on your point of view. Companies are working on this. Neuralink, the company being set up by Elon Musk, he of SpaceX and Tesla, is working on this sort of stuff. We just go across again to the web, we can find the homepage for Neuralink, breakthrough technology for the brain. Isn't that exciting? And it is exciting. This is amazing stuff going on. They are working on a chip that can be put in the brain with tiny, tiny electrodes. So small the electrodes are, they're building a robot or developing a robot to implant them, because it would be impossible for a human being to implant this type of chip. Facebook is doing amazing stuff, reading neural signals from people's wrists with sensors on the outside, but Neuralink is looking at developing interfaces we put inside the skull to link us to computers. Initially for medical purposes, to help people with particular problems, but in time, all sorts of opportunities can come from this. This said, current technology, and likely future technology at least a decade or two out, is going to be made out of metals and plastics and semiconductors, inorganic stuff. But I think in time, we are going to get organic brain-computer interfaces, machine-computer interfaces, as some people call them. And they won't have to be implanted, they won't really be implants, because we will grow them. We won't have to cut bits out of our head and chuck in the chip and then put all the head back again and heal and then use the interface. We will actually be able to take some sort of genetic drug, genetic treatment, that'll have DNA sequences which will cause us to grow a new form of internal organ, which will be a brain-computer interface, which can wirelessly communicate to a device worn on the outside of the skull and allow us to link together with computer technology to network online. That's a bonkers idea, but I think logically, I think that's the way it would have to go, because we know the human body doesn't like having things linked into it inorganically, so we're going to have inorganic interfaces. Once you've gone there, once synthetic biology is clever enough and AI will help us get there, we'll have the organic interface. And if you want to know more about my thinking on this, I have a whole video on it called Cyborg Fusion here on the Explaining Computers, not Explaining Computers, Explaining the Future YouTube channel. Come to think of it, there is a video on Explaining Computers about brain-computer interfaces that leads into this video on Cyborg Fusion. I'll give you the links to both of those videos in the video description. Anyway, can I sum up all the stuff I've been talking about here? I hope so. I'll give it a try. Is Facebook, or Meta, I'm still not used to calling it Meta, but I guess I'll get there eventually, is their vision a fantasy or not? Well, I think that the Metaverse will be a massive gaming platform in the next 10 years, and there'll be a massive associated digital content economy with people buying avatars and other digital possessions and things. And I'm sure Mark Zuckerberg is right that we'll have to get to a point with open standards. So if you build an avatar in one virtual world, you can use it in another, and you can take your virtual sword or television or whatever it is from one world to another. That stuff, I'm sure, will be a big business going ahead. And I'm sure there will be some social and business use of this technology, but it'll be relatively limited. And this is because until we have direct neural connections to cyberspace, screens and ubiquitous computing will, I think, prevail as the dominant technology. I think we are, as a species and as people in everyday lives, far more concerned about fluid access to digital content in combination with the physical world than we are with the ultimate quality we might be able to get on a less flexible basis, if you like, using, say, virtual reality in the metaverse. And of course, and this is a really important point to think about, even though Facebook might be right that in time we will end up using the metaverse more and more because we'll be able to go there directly with direct neural interfaces, with brain-computer interfaces, even if that occurs, I think the game changes when we have direct neural connections. Because if you think about it, what the focus tends to be talked about in the metaverse circle is we'll be able to link people's brains to machines. And obviously machines to people's brains, it's got to be a two-way connection. But once you can link person and computer that way, and you can link another person to a computer, what you can actually do is to link a person to a person via the medium of the internet. That changes the game, I think, completely. And therefore I give you my final thought like this. Oh, look, it says my final thought. It must be the last thing I'm going to talk about. And my contention to you is when we can neurally share each other's experiences and memories and dreams, all we'll demand of technology is the bandwidth to allow this to happen. And there won't be a role anymore for cyber intermediaries like Facebook who process the thinking of so many indirectly connected minds today. So, that's the thing to think about, isn't it? That's a final thought to get your fingers going in the comments, or the muscles in your wrists read by neural interfaces, if that happens to be where you're at. Probably isn't. You never know. You might be watching this video in 15 years' time. Anyway, that is now it for the first of these monthly presentations, and I'd be very grateful to get your feedback and thoughts in the comments about what I'm doing right, what I'm doing wrong, how I should continue, all that type of stuff. My plan right now is for the next of these, which will post on the 1st of January 2022, to be all about AI and robots and their impact on the human species and work and things like that. But now that's it for another video. If you've enjoyed what you've seen here, please press that like button, because you probably can't do it neurally with your brain just yet. If you've liked what you've seen here, also please subscribe, and I hope to talk to you again very soon.